Welcome, everyone, to Talking Textiles. My name is Charlene Clark. I'm a member of ATA and the owner of Signature Canvas Makers in Hampton, Virginia. The goal of these podcasts is to give you a glimpse into the wide variety of positions and markets that make the advanced textiles world turn. We will be talking to professionals in different roles throughout this series to help inspire the next generation of textile professionals and anyone interested in learning about others' journey in the world of textiles. ATA offers advanced textiles content throughout the year, including the upcoming Outlook Conference taking place June 2nd through the 4th in Green Bay, Wisconsin. This event features a leadership development workshop, business development track, and a government relations update. Please visit textiles.org/events to learn more. In today's episode, the topic of succession planning, I'll be speaking with Chris Ritsema, owner of Canvas Innovations, Scott Neville, owner of Wellhiner HB Wall Awning, and Travis Jenkins, president of Charlotte Tent and Awning Company. They will be sharing their own experiences with acquiring and selling businesses in hopes to inspire you in your own efforts. Now, let's talk textiles. Today on Talking Textiles, Chris Ritsema, Scott Neville, and Travis Jenkins are your featured guests. Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me today. So our topic is on succession planning. Before we begin, I'd like to ask each one of you to kind of give us an overview on how you got started in the business and whether you acquired your business, but you were an outside buyer, a long-term employee. How did you get started? Scott, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So after college, I was working for a home builder, and I knew I wanted to be my own boss, like most folks. And I am reasonably certain I wanted to stay in the construction industry, but I was looking for something niche, and I was looking for something that didn't rely on manufactured items from overseas, let's say. I really like the engineering part of this job and the problem solving. I suppose you could say the fabric structure business was right up my alley, and the rest was just by happenstance that I stumbled across this particular operation for sale, at least the first one, and made it happen. And that was in 2008.
Okay. And your business now focuses primarily on awning, is that correct?
Correct. Awnings, canopies, anything in the shade business, shade and shelter.
Excellent. So you purchased your business.
That's right.
All right. So we're going to revisit that in just a second. Travis, how about you?
All right. So I started as an installer in the business about 20 years ago. Actually, was going to college to get a computer science degree and planned to get work in the networking field and just never left. So over the years, kind of learned every department, learned bits and pieces of everything that we do. And the previous owner was ready to retire after 25 years and asked me if I wanted to take it over. So that was back in 2018. And purchased a company from him. So a little bit different setup than Scott, because I thought I was going to be in computer science arena and ended up being in fabrics for almost 20 years.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. And Chris?
Yeah, my story is a little bit more dynamic than that. Well, dynamic's not the word, I guess more interesting. I did not go to college at age 18 when I graduated. I worked for a local company and I worked there for 18 years. And I really never had any ambitions to be a business owner, but in 2005, the owners decided to sell the company and they were going to stick around for a while to help transition the business. But within probably a year to year and a half, they realized that it was a bad mistake and the company was going in the wrong direction. So I decided at that point not to go down with the ship. And I went in business with two of my coworkers, and we started a company called Canvas Fabricators. That lasted no more than 6 months. We voted one partner out because things weren't going well on that side. And then I rewrote a new business plan, and I started a company called Nautical Needle I was a part of that partnership for 5 years. And then in 2010, the same thing. I guess I had to learn the hard way. 2 years of partnerships taught me a few things. So I went to college on that hypothetically. But in 2010, I rewrote the business plan and I started from zero and I started Canvas Innovations. And that led me up till now. We specialize in custom marine canvas. Back when I was a part of Nautical Needle, we had a full upholstery department and we do quite a bit of flooring. We do Corinthian Marine, we're certified in CDEC, and we do quite a bit of Infinity. And we do some commercial sewing, but that's about the majority of what we do as a company.
Okay, excellent. So there's probably quite a few directions that we can go. But Scott, I'm going to start with you. As an outside buyer that really you were entering into a new industry that you hadn't been involved in before, but what are some of the key things that you were looking for when you were evaluating what type of business and what business you were considering ultimately buying?
As any buyer of a business or somebody looking at a business, once you get past the profitability and cash flow part of it, then I guess you have to ask, do you like what the business does? Are you interested in the product that you make or the service that you offer? And both of those boxes were checked for me, at least, because this is something that I was somewhat familiar with. The workforce was sticking around. I didn't have to deal with the old ownership or anything like that. They stuck around for maybe a couple months just to make sure that the transition happened as it was supposed to. But really have to look for a company that has a workforce that's going to stick around and make through the transition and continue to help the company be profitable. And because there's going to be a few months where you're still wading water, trying to figure out how everything is supposed to work and where you can start to inject your ideas and path.
I think you're spot on. Obviously, you don't want to take the helm of a sinking ship. That profitability and the cash flow piece is certainly important, but
Right.
I think also that it's a growing industry, right? Something that has a lot of potential to move forward and something that you can grow. You as the new owner have opportunity to grow and expand upon. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Each one of the companies that I've purchased, we each one of them had part of the market that they were not partaking in or were lagging behind in or had no interest in. I think we saw potential in every one of those. So
Sure, and that goes along with a growing brand, right? Do they have is it a name that was already trusted? The customers they've got a good reputation in their industry, things of that nature, I would think are also very important to look at as a potential buyer.
yeah, each one of the companies had a name that was over 100 years old, so we kept them.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Excellent. How important do you think, and this really is for whether you're an employee that's looking to take over, whether you're buying, whether you're starting your own business, I would also think that something along the lines of customer diversity would be important. Are you working with different segments? For instance, for Chris being in the marine canvas industry, are you working with government and military, even with the awning industry? Are you looking at working with commercial accounts, government, military? Is there diversity in what you're offering?
Yeah, I suppose there is. A lot of this depends geographically. Some markets don't have a whole lot of residential customers, at least less than some other markets. And at least where we are, the majority of our business is going to be commercial type work. And at least that gives me a direction and a focus for marketing purposes. I don't need to cast a big net and hope to get all the homeowners in a particular city. I can really focus on general contractors, property owners, big strip centers, or architects, or what have you.
Excellent. So, Travis, I'm going to switch over to you for a moment here. What advice would you give to a partner or a long-term employee that's maybe looking to buy the business that they work for? You've had that experience of making that transition. What advice would you give someone who's potentially looking to take that path?
Okay, well, I thought about my own experience because, like I said, I wasn't really planning to stay and own it. But then thinking back at what things have made this the most or the most successful is that I think with an awning company or a shade company, there's three main areas. You got the fabrication, installation, and then your sales and marketing aspects of it, or the project management. And having experience or at least a good foundation in each of those three, or having key personnel in those places. So if you're by a company like Scott, it sounded like he kept the people that he had in those positions to allow his transition to be not as much of a learning process. Or for me, it was something that I grew up in, or you got to have somebody here that can do it. And so having those key personnel, or at least an understanding of it, is important. I also think that with this industry, it is an industry, and most of the people in it are, we'll say, seasoned and been in it for a long time. And so having good discussions with your vendors, the vendors, I think, in this industry are very good about working with you if you're running into issues or you're running into the problems with a specific project. They'll come out, they'll meet with you, they'll go through the project, they'll help troubleshoot. And so I do think it's very, very good if you were stepping into this industry. It's one that's very helpful to help progress or to make sure that you're successful.
And so, Chris, let's hear from you a little bit. Now, you had a little bit of a different path. You had some transitions throughout your career. What were some of the things that you learned, and what are the things that within those learnings, what did you do differently when you took those experiences and started your own business? What did you do differently? What are some of the learnings?
Yeah, so I'd probably start out with my 18 years as an employee. I think as I was getting to the end of my career, I realized that there were certain things that frustrated me. For instance, simple things of giving people a game plan for the future. How do you retain employees? I think a lot of the people that worked with me, they were kind of in a career that they figured they were stuck in. They liked it, but they never really had any goals for the future. The other thing that you guys can probably appreciate is the fact that when I was an employee, there was never any further in education. So when I went into business on my own, the first thing I did is I engaged in the MFA. And that was life changing. So along with that, the owner of the company I worked for, reviews were very bland. Hey, you're doing a good job. Here's a cost of living raise. I wanted to empower people and say, where can you be in 3 to 5 years? So for me, those are some things that, going from an employee to a business owner, those are things that I instantly wanted to improve on. And like I said, furthering education was huge for me. I think I'm where I'm at today because of furthering education, the camaraderie through the MFA, the IFAI. Those were some things that really made a difference for me.
Regardless of what path that we take, I think there's some basic foundational things that every business really needs to have and to build on. Statistically, it's been said that only about 72% of small business owners actually have an exit plan, right? They actually have a plan for what happens next and how that transition is going to happen and how that succession plan is going to happen. And so I think it's important, for all business owners to think about what are the things that they need to make that transition successful, however way they decide to do it, whether they're transitioning it to a family member, whether they're selling it outright, or having a long-term employee take over. And to me, that's things like having the right people in place and having a long-term path forward. Chris, you talked about giving them a path forward. I think everybody needs to know where they stand, right? So having measurables for your team and how do they get to that next level? What's their path forward? What do you guys think about processes? I know for our business, we're very focused on processes. Taking the franchise model, right? McDonald's, Big Macs are the same wherever you go in the world because they have processes that dictate how things should happen and how that should be built. Is that an important part of your businesses?
Charlene, as you know, Chandler and yourself and me have talked many times at the trade shows. And I read the book, The E-Myth, many years ago, and another one called Up Your Business. And what I learned quickly is that you mentioned McDonald's, right? I think that is mentioned in the book, The E-Myth. If you're going to have a business that you can sell, you really need to have SOPs. If you don't have standard operating procedures, your business is never going to run without you. And I learned that the hard way. I had a couple big losses of some employees in the past that have been with me 10 years. And when they left, it was a lot to clean up because we didn't have enough in writing. So hyper focused on SOPs. We are now in the process of making videos internally, and we're taking it to the next level. I mean, professional videos, right? I've got a guy here that edits. And so for everything that we do, we're creating those. I've heard it said in books that I've read, a business really isn't marketable if the business can't run without the owner. So I took that pretty serious. And so we're developing SOPs. We're technology driven. I think another thing that's important is that if someone wants to buy your business, I'm trying to say this without offending anybody, but I think it's important to move forward as the industry moves into technology. Some of the old school things, which I learned in the mid 80s and 90s, were very applicable then, but it's getting to the place where if you have a business that seems to be attractive, you got to be on the cutting edge of technology. So I've focused on that for probably almost 8 years now. I think the reputation of your business, how long have you been in business? What causes somebody to look at your business and want to buy it? I think a business that is 5 years old over a business that is 20, 30, 40, 50 is a little bit different of an attraction point for a buyer. I think the reputation has to speak for itself. The longevity of client base, I think, is really, really important. If you have specific marinas that you've been working for many years, I think that's an attraction thing for a buyer. I think it's important too that we've all talked about this, a diversity of products. What does your company focus on? I don't do any awnings. However, I will recover them because I don't have a weld shop. I'm not interested in that. We do sail shades. We'll do big shades, but we don't deal with installing any of the mounts or the poles that are necessary for large shades. But being in commercial, being in custom, we work for a lot of builders. We work for a lot of sports companies that set up outdoor playlands. Within builders, we're covering outdoor furniture. Right here on Lake Michigan, there's a lot of very wealthy homes between Holland and Saugatuck. So we're doing a lot of covers for the builders. So I'm talking in terms of diversity. I think that's important too, that a company has more than one leg to stand on.
Travis, I'm curious, and Chris, you probably have had this experience too. You talked about the book, The E-Myth.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the concept of the E-Myth is people that are technicians that then want to move into that business ownership role or that leadership role. As the technician side of things, what were you not prepared for when people are in the role of a technician? It's I can do that better than they can. I don't know why I don't have my own business. I can do better. I can all the things until you're in that role. And then you realize running a small business is not the easiest thing on the planet. There's certainly a lot of challenges that our workers, our employees don't get to see that side of it. Did you experience any of that when you were transitioning into your roles?
Absolutely. So I was previous 2 years before I took over ownership, I was a general manager, and the owner had already started to work himself out. I think maybe ego or just naive, thinking that whenever I took over, it was just going to be much of the same, add in a few different things. And then when you get into that spot, cash flow actually means something when you've got to pay the bills and make payroll instead of just some numbers on a piece of paper or trying to buy equipment or trying to continue with our trucks and our trailers and DOT and all the other stuff that kind of goes in that you don't really think about until you're responsible for that. We've got 45 employees and we've been around for 145 years now. So we've got that same longevity to where it's a reputation that you want to make sure that you withhold or that you keep it up and then grow it. So a lot of the stuff when you take over is different than when you're just managing or running a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think so. I'll be vulnerable here. I didn't go to college. I went to high school. I really didn't like the books until I went into business. But for me, I tell everybody I was educated through the school of hard knocks, and it's been ever changing. But one thing that really changed it for me, probably I'd say 7 years into my business, I realized that it would be beneficial to have business coaching. And since 2010, when I started Canvas Innovations, I have had two business coaches that have independently helped me in their own individual way. And currently, I have a really good friend. I call him a surrogate father because I've known him for 25 years, but he came out of retirement. He was in human resources, and he has just added a bunch to our business because I hit the ceiling a long time ago. And I realized without older, smarter people than me, I had taken the business. I had 3 years in a row that I broke a number that I was very excited to break. And when that happened, I did it 3 years in a row. And I realized, you know what? This is it. I can't do anything else without bringing somebody else into the business. Part of that was my succession plan that I had already been preparing for. And the second thing was having somebody in the building at least 32 hours a week that could do things that I could not do well. And part of it is when you get to 7 to 10 employees, if you don't have a floor manager, no matter how much you project the company's culture and goals and SOPs, if you don't have a policeman on the floor, things just don't stick long term unless you have somebody there that can hold the team accountable to what it is we believe in our culture.
Yeah, culture is certainly, Scott, you mentioned that you were lucky to have the workforce stayed on when you purchased your business. In our company, we have 12 employees. And just recently someone asked me the question, what's the one thing that you think is the most important thing to have that employees are looking for in a company? And my answer was that I don't really think it's just one thing. Certainly, I think everyone wants to get paid well, but pay is not necessarily a motivator for everyone. Everyone wants to come into work. They want to have a good work environment. They want to enjoy what they do. I also think that they need to see a path forward, right? So, not just, okay, it's the end of the year or the beginning of the next year, so everybody gets a raise. We have rewards programs. We track their numbers. Everyone at least has a number with us, so they know what their goals are, and they know what they're trying to achieve, and they see a path forward, and they get rewarded at more frequent increments, so that throughout the year they're staying engaged with us, and they're learning, they're growing. And that's really how we keep them engaged in our company and in our culture. You're all spot on with keeping them engaged in, and everyone likes to learn. They all want to do different things. We also use the concept of right people in the right seats, RPRS, right people, right seats. We've had people that are great sewers, but they don't really want to sew. They want to do something else in our company. So they fit all of our core values. They believe in our culture. They believe in what we're trying to achieve. But so we want to keep them obviously in our business. But if that's not in the role, if they're not in the role that they want to be, then we're certainly going to help them try to find what does fit for them and what they do, because we want to ultimately keep them in the company. I think that employee engagement is certainly good to keep people long term, and helping them see a path, even if the company is going to be transitioned, being able to move that forward. Shifting gears just a little bit here. When you, Scott, transitioned and bought your company, did the company, the owner of the company that you bought from, did they have a transition period to ease you into the company? And could go vice versa. If you were looking to eventually sell your business, what would you offer to the new buyer?
I was offered about 4 months of the previous owner's time on the first company that we bought.
Mhm.
And that was more than enough time to learn at least what his job was each day, let's call it. Like had been mentioned before, we retained most of the staff, at least all the key members as far as bookkeeping and key production members. But I think that amount of time is probably, if the new owner is engaged enough. I suppose it would also depend on who you're selling your operation to. The other two companies that we bought, they were competitors, you could say, of mine. We didn't need any of their ownership's input after that.
Okay. Chris, how about you?
I'll give you just a little bit of background. Since I started Canvas Innovations in 2010 up until my succession plan, which was this past May 1st when we signed papers, I probably had 4 offers during that time frame to sell my business. And what I thought was unique is the people that were wanting to buy my business were not the peoples of the emails that you get saying they want to buy your business. They were clients. There were clients that I had worked for 15, 20 years, maybe even longer, that watched the business grow. It kind of goes hand in hand with the reputation. Some of these business owners had other businesses. One guy approached me and said he had a son coming out of college. He wondered what my succession plan was, wanted to buy the business, wanted his son to train under me because it's the clients, right? Feel like it was a reputation. But what happened is I turned all those down because I've had two of my top, I would say my top team members through the years that both had succession plans. The first one failed because some dynamics changed with the team member, and it ended up being in my benefit not to have them buy the business. But the second one was pretty difficult because he was the one I thought should buy the business, but through getting married, having kids, he was like me. He worked a lot of hours. I think his wife was not wanting him to continue. So there was a company that his family was a part of that franchised, and the business became $1 billion business. They're worldwide. It was very hard for me to compete with it because they were offering him similar pay, similar benefits for 40 hours a week, and he was working 55 hours a week. So, that's tough, right? A little bit of a trail there, but back to making the transition smooth, how my business came on the market. It really was word of mouth through my local area of people I was working with. But because I turned all those down, by the second time that an employee that wanted to buy in had bailed, I went a different direction and I started reaching out to some of those people. So that's how I came about for that. But as far as making it smooth, first of all, they had expectations for me. They were not interested in buying the business unless they signed a 5-year work contract. But for me, I was okay with that. I'm not going to sell the business and be bored. I don't really have any hobbies. So I will always work. And I even talked to them in terms of after my 5-year work contract, I would be willing to stay on part time and be someone that could train. Also, I'm good with sales, so I have some visions of expanding the business. So for me, I really don't have a true retirement. I have a work contract that ends at age 60. That was something they wanted. They paid for a professional evaluation, very important for me because although I had a friend that was an accountant and he told me how to do it, they wanted it, right? Instead of just taking my word at what the company was worth, they paid for a very expensive evaluation. It came in higher than I thought, which was great, right? To my benefit. The other thing that I did when they were interested is they wanted to know a little bit more about the business, not just financially, because it was a 5-year evaluation, but they wanted to know where are you going as a company. So we laid out where we wanted to be. We always would have goals with dates set of what the things that we wanted to do to grow. It was in regards to equipment, bringing things more in house, like we do CDEC. We're talking in terms of buying our own CNC and branding our own type of flooring. So they wanted to know, had I not sold, where was I taking the company? Yeah, and really what it was a 3 to 5 year vision of where we wanted to go, and it really excited them. So I think those were things I brought that they needed to make the transition smooth. I think those are pretty key components. Obviously, with an evaluation, you're going to look at 5 years of net profits. I think most businesses, and it does vary, but in talking to, you know, friends that I have in the industry, Charlene being one of them, what's the average net profit for a company? I think that's important. And there's variations of what that could look like. Some people would say 18 to 20%. I've talked to a couple other of my friends that are doing 20, 25%. The ones that seem to be doing more are technology geared. Again, I haven't talked to 50 people. I probably talked to 20, but I think it's important that you have a very profitable business. And I'm guessing, Travis, you can speak to that too. If Trav, did you buy the business or did you sell? I don't recall.
I bought it. So I was previous owner, had been in it 25 years. And so he stepped away, didn't have any kids that wanted to take it over. So for me, the transition process, I wanted to get him out as soon as possible, just because it would be a conflict of, everybody's used to him. And so if I made a call, then they would go and ask him about the same call. So I would say if you grow up in a business, keeping the old owner around would have to be in a consultant role or something where they're not visible, because it could just lead to a lot of conflicts. And fortunately for me, still great friends with the guy, and he stepped away and said, "Hey, if you need me, I'm here, but I'm gonna get out of your way because I don't want to cause any issues."
Mm-hmm.
So that transition was, for me, maybe a little bit different than Scott stepping in and wanting to keep some of those key personnel, at least to glean some information from them before he asked them to move away. And then as far as the business valuations, I think we did 12 different valuations of the business before I bought it. And with the awning industry, we're not really an asset heavy business. Most of it is based on your reputation, long-term contracts, and your profitability. I'm not ready for an exit plan or a transition plan yet, but definitely want to make sure that profitability and stuff is looking good, and minimizing the asset purchases and stuff to try to make your bottom line look better near the end will definitely help. I think the sell price or the what you hope to get out of it.
I made a note when you were talking about transitioning the previous owner out, that I would think that would be something interesting for family owned businesses, right? Or people that are transitioning from one generation to the next, especially if the younger generation that's taking over is very focused on technology advancements and what it can do for their industry. But dad or mom or uncle are probably more in the traditional aspects of the industry, the business. So it'd be interesting to see how that type of transition would take place and finding a common ground.
I had something. The previous owner's brother-in-law still worked here when I took over, and so that was a little interesting for a short period of time. And then we just decided that it wasn't something that worked well for either one of us. But yeah, there was some differences of opinions about how things should transition or how things should go. And so yeah, the long-term employees or anyone that's been in it for a long time is always going to question the changes or some of the things that we want to put in. And so sometimes it's easier to move them out. Sometimes it's maybe you should listen because they got some really good ideas.
All right.
I got one more comment. I don't know. I guess I left a pretty big detail out in my acquisition. The people that bought it have been in the marine industry since they were in diapers, and they own a marina. They own a very large storage and service business. So really, when they wanted to buy it, other than a 5-year work contract, he said, "Chris, I'm going to be very hands off. I just want you and Jenny to run it the way you've run it for the last 15 years." So I'm forcing him to be more involved. He's meeting the staff. He's building a rapport with the staff. The marina that they own is literally a half a mile from my shop. And what's interesting, I know this is off topic, but this has been happening in the last 6 weeks. They took a look at the way we were running our business. They were a little blown away by it because the marina that they bought was a little bit of a misfit. Old school, time sheets, not even familiar with Intuit workforce and all that, how that merges. We are now literally setting up their entire marina to run the way that we run our business, with Pipefy being our CRM, workforce being our time tracking and reports. Scott and Travis, I don't know if you're familiar with this. Maybe you guys maybe the awning business has their own software. I know that Marigrove Awning, I went to a regional many years ago, and that's what really got me amped up about all those types of things. And that's when I started implementing. Are your guys' business running that way, or you have old time sheets where you punch a clock and people doing times on a written piece of paper? Does anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, we actually went to Intuit Workforce and then used that because we plug in our job numbers and then it imports all of it together. So we use that for time tracking. When I first started, we had an old time clock that you punched in and had it on a card. But
Yep.
Yeah, but now we've been using the Workforce for maybe 4 years now. It was something that I transitioned to after I took over ownership. And then as far as CRM, the previous owner's son developed software, and so he created something for us before he retired, and so we use that as our internal CRM that was just written for us directly from the previous owner's son. So we still use that to this day.
We punch time clocks still. Yeah, we do utilize customer service management software, but yeah, we still punch clocks. So
how do you distinguish between the jobs they're working on? You can punch in the morning and punch out at evening. How do you track your jobs?
There's a lot of oversight back in the manufacturing department. Once the job file leaves the salesman's office and it goes into production, we can see which items are missing, whether it be something for the weld shop or something for the fabric shop. And we know which staff member has taken that particular folder. We push a lot of paper, to be honest with you, but the process works.
Sure. That's really all that matters, right? Not dogging anybody that's not doing it, just having conversation. So if it works, that's really what matters.
I guess we are coming to about our time limit here on our podcast, but just want to ask, do you have any each one of you, do you have any last minute advice or last minute comments about succession planning and what worked for you, what didn't work, what advice you could give? Scott, you want to start us off?
I would say when we first got into this, some of these companies were involved in several different products and items. And over the years, we had to decide what backyard we were going to play in and which items took up more time than they were worth. And to be honest with you, we slimmed down what we do and what we focus on over the years. Some things were making money, but they were taking my install staff's time. I would say determine what you do best and just do that.
Yeah, that's really good advice because I think by nature we all when we come into a business, whether we start a business, you want to take everything, right? You want to be the go-to people, but the reality is, you can quickly overwhelm your business by doing that and not taking the work that's profitable and really what you're best at, because the things you're best at are the things you're going to make the most money at.
Yeah.
It's one thing to diversify, it's another thing to diversify smartly.
Yeah. While we did lose some things that we had done in the past, what we learned is that most of our customers wanted a complete turnkey solution to the products that we build and sell and install. And every once in a while, you have to rely on let's say, an engineer or an electrician. So we've tried to bring all of that in-house and offer a complete turnkey solution. So hopefully you know, when it gets to the point where I want to sell or walk away from this, somebody will have an operation that they don't have to fill in any blanks or go looking for an industry partner or something like that. All the questions will be answered right here.
Yeah, and that certainly is going to add value for you in your
Right.
business when you're looking to sell that to the next person. So it's
Right.
great advice, really great advice.
Yep.
Travis, any last parting thoughts, advice, words of wisdom?
I would say be open-minded and humble. So just because it's the way you've always done it, like I said, we've been doing things for a long time, and just because we've done it that way doesn't mean it's the right way, or it doesn't mean that there's not a new method or a new product that you need to be looking at, or maybe you just need to get rid of some customers. This past 2-3 years, we've got rid of customers that, based on the contracts and things, that looked like they were a good customer, but then when you go through the work, what Scott was talking about, we were just spending too much time, too many return trips, just poor scheduling, different things. It's just, they didn't work. And don't be afraid to get rid of those customers, get new products, and then be humble, because if you're talking to your team, if you're talking to the guys that do it every day, you're going to learn something if you're listening. And so don't be afraid to talk to them and then find out what they've got, because it'll help you to run the business better. New processes that we've made just from talking to our install guys and finding out that this doesn't work and we need to do something different.
Yeah, that's really great advice. For one thing, I think all of our industries are evolving so rapidly, especially now with new technology coming in, and it is important. And we're sometimes, as business owners, so close to our businesses that we maybe see things a lot differently. We started asking our employees about things like, on a Friday morning, we'd get them all together and say, okay, what bugged you this week? What didn't work? What's broken? What do we need to look at? And it was interesting, the things that they see that we didn't necessarily see because we're so close to it and we're looking at it from a whole different perspective and at a whole different level. So when you're getting them involved and you're getting them engaged, they feel like they're part of the bigger picture and they feel like they're part of moving the business forward. So yeah, I think you're spot on that, Travis. I think it's really important to listen and to really see things with a different set of eyes sometimes to move your business forward.
Yep.
That's great advice. Yeah. Chris?
I might just continue on what Travis said. I think business coaching has taught me a lot. I've read a lot of books on leadership, and he said humble. I think that's key. We've gone through a lot of books on culture in the past with our staff, and the one that was probably, I would say, the best one I ever read was called The Ideal Team Player. It was very simple. There were three key things that you need, and humble is one of them. Hungry is another one, and the other one is smart. And smart is not necessarily intelligent. If you ever get a bug to read the book, it's a good read. But we take those three principles, we're building them into our culture every day. It's a lot broader than that because we've expanded it, but that's it. Humble, number one, hungry, and smart. And the other thing I would say, we failed a lot, as I'm sure all of you have. I think it's important that when you fail, you fall forward. You don't live there. You need to be ever changing, you need to be ever growing. And that's one more plug I'm going to put for the MFA is that every time I went, there was always enough value in learning 2 or 3 things that made my business better. And it was consistent for, I don't know how many years I've been in, 15. I've been out for 3 just because of the transition of the business. But I'll be back because even at 56, I never quit learning. It's very important that you're falling forward. You're changing what you do. I bet every time we went to a trade show, I came home with 4 or 5 new things that I shared with the staff that we were going to change.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. We call it fail forward fast.
Yes.
Well, gentlemen, that's about all the time we have for today. But thank you all so much for being a part of this today and for your insight and your input and your successes in transitioning to your businesses. So we appreciate you all. And thank you very much for being a part of this.
Thanks, Charlene.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of ATA Talking Textiles. ATA is a not-for-profit association representing the international specialties fabric marketplace. Learn more about the events, workshops, and webinars ATA hosts throughout the year at textiles.org/events.